friends, and welcome to or back to my channel. My name's Haley, and today we're going to be doing my August wrap up. So August was a bit of a wild month as I went back to school as in my job. I am a teacher, so I went back to work, and so we had teacher work days, and then we had school starting. I also had cheerleading, which is something that I coach at my school. And so it really became hectic during teacher work week. I was working almost 12-hour days every day, and I wasn't really on a schedule, and I also just was not really feeling myself. It was a big adjustment from summer to back to school because I did not really do much during the summer. I was pretty lazy, and I was just pretty honestly feeling really depressed, and so I wasn't really doing much. And so going from doing nothing to having a structure that I have to follow was a lot, a very big transition for me. And so my reading definitely took a bit of a hit. I did still read 9 books, which is a lot, but it was mostly audio and it was mostly task avoidance. So I wasn't necessarily enjoying everything I was reading, and I was kind of reading for the wrong reasons. So I just didn't have the best time with the books that I read in August. All that being said, 9 books is still really good. I'm still really proud of myself for reading that much. But it just wasn't the best reading month in quality or quantity for me. And so I'm really hoping that I can step it up and enjoy books for the rest of the year. But yeah, so I also wanted to film this video before now. It's already September 12th when I'm filming this, but I just have been literally so busy with practice and work. Yeah, this is what we get. I kind of got to the point where I was oh my god, I'm just gonna stop making videos because I just started and I'm not that good at it anyways. But then I was no, you can do it. It will get better. So here we are doing the August wrap up, even though it's halfway through September. So I'm going to tell you about the 9 books that I read. I am just going to do them in order again because I don't feel like trying to rank them in order of my feelings about them. And also some of them I feel I read so long ago I already forgot everything. But we're just going to do our best and we're just going to get started. The first book that I finished in August was The Escape Room by Megan Goldin. I gave this book 3 stars, and this book follows a group of executives from this team, and I don't remember what they do, but they work at this high level. I think it's a marketing or maybe some sort of contracting, and they're not good people, and they make deals with people that kind of impact a lot of others in negative ways. I know that sounds so stupid, but anywho, there's this group of people and they work together and they're not good people and they do their jobs well, but their jobs aren't really good ethical things. And right when they're all about to have their little weekend, they get this very serious email that they all have to do this team bonding thing, and it's this escape room. And so they all show up to this escape room, and then they get trapped in this elevator, and it's oh, it's an escape room, but then you quickly find out it's not actually a real escape room. It's somebody's legitimately trapped them in there. And so then you're following that, and you're following that storyline and all the people, and they're just kind of turning against each other, and all their little secrets are getting revealed. And then you're also following a timeline in the past where they had this other employee at their company, and I don't remember her name. It doesn't even say the other girl's name, but you find out you're following this timeline a few years back. And so obviously because she's not around anymore, you're oh, something happened to her, but you don't really know what. And so you're kind of that's how you're kind of getting to know the people on this team, is the past timeline with this girl working there, and then the present timeline is when they're trapped in the elevator. And I thought this book was just okay. It was interesting, but it got to the point where I was kind of okay, I don't really care anymore. It was entertaining for what it was, but it wasn't anything great. I thought the twist was just kind of mediocre, and it definitely wasn't one of Megan Goldin's better books, in my opinion. The next book that I read in August was Midnight Ruin by Katie Robert, and this was a reread in preparation for Dark Restraint, which is the 7th book in the Dark Olympus series. And Midnight Ruin is following... How do I not know? I read this book twice this year. Karen and one of the sisters, Demeter's sister, I can't even remember. Here, let's look. This is my personality. It's honestly so unfortunate. Eurydice, is that how I say it? Eurydice. Okay, it's fine. I only listen to the audiobook, it's fine. Eurydice and Sharon and Eros? Orpheus, good God. Okay, so it's Eurydice, Sharon, and Orpheus, and it does turn into like a little bit of like a polyamorous thing. This book is good. I mean, it's nothing crazy. Like, I liked this book because of the parts that were like outside of the relationship. Honestly, like the drama's really kicking up in this world. Like, you're following, like, as Olympus is kind of starting to fall apart. So like, obviously you're following these like dirty little relationships, but you're also like following that. And I am like enjoying that. And I feel like that's really not the point of these books. And most people are probably wish they weren't in there, but I genuinely do like that part. And so I like that whole situation. So I read this in preparation for Dark Restraint, and then I, of course, have not touched Dark Restraint, even though I was so freaking pumped about it. So I will be reading that when I get the chance. But this one's good. It's 4 stars. It's nothing like amazing, but it's still a good book. And I reread it because I was getting this series and the A Touch of Darkness series mixed up in my brain because I read both of them this year / the end of last year, the beginning of this year, and so I was kind of getting them confused, and so I just really wanted to like lock back into the Dark Olympus world before I read the next book. Okay, the next book that I read was The Pairing by Casey McQuiston, and this book was a really, really big bummer for me. I did not enjoy this book nearly as much as I was expecting to. I love Red, White, and Royal Blue and One Last Stop. Like, those are 2 of my favorite books ever. And so I was really looking forward to this new Casey McQuiston book, but unfortunately it fell pretty flat for me. This book, we're following Theo and Kit, and they are 2 exes, and they were supposed to go on this European wine tour, cheap food and wine tour, and they broke up on the plane on the way there. And so then they get their vouchers, and they have like 4 years to redeem their vouchers, and neither one of them does it until like the last month before it expires. And so then they still end up on the wine tour, even though they like have not spoken or done anything together in 4 years since they broke up. And so then when they're on the trip, they're like trying to prove that they're over each other, and so they're kind of like trying to like sleep with other people, and just, yeah. This book, there's a few things I didn't like about it. One, the reason they broke up was so fucking stupid. Like, it was just, I told myself I wasn't going to say bad words on this channel, but it was so dumb. Like, the reason they broke up was just so stupid, and it was just like, you look at them and you're like, that's so childish. Like, I can't believe that's like genuinely the reason why you broke up. 2, the characters were just so annoying. Like, I did not care. I was like not necessarily rooting for them because I thought they were just kind of annoying. 3, maybe this was intentional, but like I genuinely couldn't tell if one of the characters was a girl or a boy. Not that it mattered, I was just getting confused. 4, what else? There was like other reasons why I didn't like. Oh, I felt like the way that it was written, I wasn't really getting to like actually know the characters. I feel like so like half the book was from one perspective and half the book was from the other perspective. And like when it was, for example, when it was from Theo's perspective, we were just getting how like Theo sees Kit, and I felt like we weren't actually getting Kit's characterization like from his point of view. Or I don't even remember which one was the girl and which one was the boy. And then one of them wanted to be they, which is, like, I don't even remember who was who. But I just felt like the only way, like, characterization we got was, like, how the one character sees the other character rather than how the characters see themselves. And I didn't like that because I didn't think that it was a very accurate representation of the characters, because I feel like they had a lot of misunderstandings and they just, like, assumed that the other person felt one way when that wasn't really true, and there was a lot of miscommunication. And so I didn't like that we were really getting the main characterization as, like, oh, like, Theo's describing how they see Kit, and, like, that's how Kit is as a person, because I don't really think Theo had an accurate read on who Kit was as a person and vice versa. So I didn't like that the way the characters were introduced to us and characterized. I just didn't enjoy that, and I thought that it made me enjoy the story a lot less, because I just felt like I didn't know who the characters were, and what I did know about them, I was just kind of like, I don't love this for either of them. So overall, not my favorite. There were like some really good side characters. It was like a nice, like, vibey book. Like, the vibes of being in Europe and going on the food and the wine tour was very nice, but overall I just like couldn't get on board with the relationship and the main characters, and so I definitely was not, this was not for me. The next book that I read was Husbands and Lovers by Beatrice Williams. And this book actually was really good. I really enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 stars. I probably would have given it 5 stars if it would have been interesting enough for me to read in a normal period of time. But I actually started this one in June and I didn't finish it until August. So this one took me a really long time to read because I just was never really necessarily oh, I want to pick this up. But when I was reading it, I really enjoyed it. So this is a dual timeline, and we're following Hannah in the past in the 1950s in Cairo with her husband. And then in the present, we're following Mallory and her sister, which I cannot remember her sister's name. The fact that I remembered anyone's name, I'm actually pretty proud of myself. And obviously these 2 timelines are going to be connected. So in the present day timeline, there's 2 timelines. There's present day, and then there's 10 years previous that are both following Mallory. And so you're following Mallory in the present day with her son, and then you also are following Mallory in the relationship that she got her son from. And so there's a lot going on. It's a lot of different timelines, but I think the story is very interesting. I liked the way the characters were. They felt like a real family. They felt the decisions that the characters were making seemed like something that real people would do given the circumstances they were in. And I just really liked the way the characters were there for each other while they were still hurting and having their own problems. I just really liked the way that the characters interacted and the way that the family dynamics were in this book. I really enjoyed this one, and I recommend if you like contemporary historical fiction, you like dual timeline, I think you would like this book. The next book that I read is The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune, and this is a reread, and this book is just so sweet. I really enjoyed this book. This time I listened to it on audio, and the first time I read it physically, but the audio, TJ Klune's audio is so good. The people he picks for the narrators, they're so amazing, and they do very distinct fitting voices for all of the different characters, and I just love the way that the audiobooks, all of TJ Klune's books that I've read on audio, I've enjoyed so much. And so I loved the voices that this narrator did for all the little characters, especially Lucy. His voice was so funny. This book follows Linus, who is a caseworker for magical youth, and he goes out to this one specific house in the Cerulean Sea, and he is investigating them to make sure that everything's kind of going the way that it plans, or the way that it should be going. And he kind of falls in love with these kids and their caretaker as well, and it is just such a sweet, wholesome book, and I really enjoyed it. And I'm very excited because the second one came out earlier this week, and so now I can read the follow-up. The next book that I read is Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree, and this is a cozy fantasy book, and it is a little bit outside of my normal wheelhouse, but I did want to give it a try because I was seeing it all over the place, and I really did enjoy this book. So in this book, we're following Viv, and Viv is kind of you at the beginning of the book, you see her kind of slaying someone, that's literally not slay, but like murdering someone. And then after that, she's I don't want this life for myself anymore. I'm gonna settle in this little village and I'm gonna start a coffee shop. But the thing is people there don't even know what coffee is, which is so crazy. And so then she's basically just setting up this coffee shop and living her life. And obviously there is some drama from her past life from all of the slaying, but it's very minor. And basically we're just following Viv as she meets these people in this community and makes coffee and makes people fall in love with coffee. And I definitely thought this book was good. It was something that I enjoyed while I was reading it, but it wasn't something that I'm gonna go out of my way to read again or anything. I gave it 3 stars. But then I also this month read the second book, Bookshops and Bone Dust, and I actually liked this one a lot more. So this one follows Viv as well, and this is set before Legends and Lattes. And so in this one, Viv has to take a pause from her slaying days because she gets injured. And so she gets stuck in this little town while she is recovering, and her little gang of people goes to do some mission, and they're okay, we'll come get you on the way back. And while she's in this town waiting for her gang to come back for her, she goes to this bookshop, and this is where she meets Fern, and her and Fern become friends. And along the course of the book, they're kind of fixing up the bookshop, and so you can kind of see this is where she learns the skills and gets the kind of the inspiration to start her coffee shop in the future. And there's also some little little side plot things that happen with like more dangerous people, and you kind of meet some of the characters that you see in Legends and Lattes, and you kind of see how they like came into her life. And then the epilogue is so good, and it like connects to Legends and Lattes, and I really loved this one. I love this one a lot more than the first one, and I do overall like recommend these books. I think it was really fun, and I would love to read more stuff like this in the future. And if I didn't say, I gave Bookshops and Bone Dust 4 stars. The next book that I read was Once There Were Wolves by Charlotte... Wait, who is it by? By Charlotte It looks like McConaughey, but I don't think that's how they said it in the audiobook, like when I was listening to it. This book was actually so good. I said I didn't have that many good books, but now that I'm like looking back on it, there were like good books. I guess I was just having a bad time in life. And so like nothing was that felt that great. But Once There Were Wolves was good. I gave it 5 stars. So this book follows these two girls that are sisters, and one of them is like the lead scientist on this project where they are reintroducing wolves into the wilderness in Scotland. And so we're following that, and then there's a lot of other things going on. We are following kind of their personal life as well, and we're learning a lot of stuff. And when I was first starting this book, it was kind of it seemed like one of those books where the author just constantly makes bad things happen for shock value and just to kind of like make you intrigued and like push the story along, but without it really having meaning. And it kind of seems like that for like the first like 30-40%, because you're learning more about the main character and also some of our other side characters, and you're kind of like, wow, that doesn't seem necessary, or like, wow, I don't really know why that had to happen. But then the further you go and the more you learn, the more it all connects and the more it gets explained. It really makes sense, and you're like, okay, that actually seems like pretty realistic. And so at first I definitely was like, this book is just being so dramatic, but then like the further I got, the more it all came together, and I was really enjoyed the story and the way that the author told these characters' lives. There is a lot of triggers in this book. Like there's a lot of bad shit that happens to these people. So definitely be aware of going in, like if you are interested in reading this book, that there is a lot of bad and hard topics discussed. Not bad topics, bad things and like hard topics discussed. Like there's sexual assault and unaliving people. There's bad things, okay? But overall, I loved the way the story turned out. I really didn't think I would care about the wolves, but I did. I cared about the characters. I wanted the best for everyone, and I just really did end up falling in love with this story, and I do recommend this one. It's also very short. It's less than 300 pages. And then the last book that I read this month was The Kennedy Debutante by Carrie Mayer. And this book, unfortunately, was a bit of a flop for me. I still gave it 3 stars, so it wasn't necessarily a bad book, but it definitely dragged out a little too much for me, and I just think that there was a little too much going on. So this book follows not Jackie. What's her name? This whole book, I read a whole book about this person. I know her name. Here it is. I can hold it up. I felt lazy. I didn't want to hold up the other ones, but I can get this one. This one follows Kathleen Kennedy, which is JFK's younger sister, one of them. It goes by Kik. And so this one follows Kik Kennedy as she comes out in her debutante season in 1938, before World War II began. Her dad was one of the ambassadors to London, and so the whole Kennedy family was residing in London. And so she was having her debutante season in 1938. And so she was coming out, you know, and like I didn't really understand what a debutante season was, so I had to look it up. But basically, like all of the girls of age between like 18 and 20, they get introduced to the monarchy, and then they just have a bunch of parties and try to get married to people with high status and like people that are in like nobility. And so basically the characters at the beginning are just like, she's having her debutante season, she's going out, and of course she meets someone named Billy, but Billy and her cannot be together because her family is Catholic and his family is Protestant, and that is just something that people are still highly frowning upon in the late 1930s. And then we follow her story from there. After she meets Billy and she like wants to be with him, but she can't. She has to go back to America once the war starts, and then we kind of like follow her story from there. This is what's considered biographical fiction, which is another thing is I didn't really understand what biographical fiction meant. But biographical fiction, from what I understand now, it basically is telling a true story, and the fiction part is the part about how the characters were feeling, or maybe certain conversations that were had where like they take as much truth as possible, but like there's no way to tell like how the characters were feeling, or you know, things that might have gone down. And so that's the fiction part of this. So like the events of this book are true. Almost all of the characters except for one or two are real people. The real things happened. And so I did enjoy this book. I did like learning about the Kennedy family through the lens of this book. Obviously we did follow Kik mainly, but like her family was very important to her, and so that was something that was a priority in her life. And so I did really enjoy this. And one thing that did shock me, which like I don't want to say this is like a spoiler for the book because this is just like a historical fact, but their oldest daughter, she was like mentally ill. They did a lobotomy on her. And I genuinely had no idea. And I hate like admitting this to the internet because it makes me feel stupid. But like if you don't know something. I didn't realize that they did lobotomies as recently as the 1940s. I thought lobotomies were something they did in like the 1700s. Like I didn't realize that lobotomies were something that was happening less than 100 years ago. And so when I found out that they did a lobotomy on her sister in like 1941, it was either 1941 or 1942, I was so shook. I was like, that is literally so insane. I had no idea. And then I looked it up, and her sister ended up living to be old, like she died in 2005, which is like I don't know how old she ended up being, but like she was basically just like a shell of a person because obviously part of her brain was missing. But that genuinely blew my mind so much, and that kind of stuff was like really interesting to me because it's just one of those things where like you think you know history, but it's also sometimes it's just like putting it in perspective, being like, okay, 80 years ago, people were getting their brains removed because they thought that would make women less hysterical and less mentally ill. Don't even get me started on that. But that was something that was really interesting to me. I also thought it was interesting how opposed her family was, and like how their families were so like, no, you cannot get married because you are Protestant and you are Catholic, and how just like a big of a deal that was, and how her parents were like, no, we literally will not bless your marriage. So I thought that was definitely interesting. I'm sure it's realistic because this is a biographical fiction, but I didn't realize that that was something that happened so recently in the past, you know, like less than 100 years ago. So overall, I learned a lot from this book. I liked the story. I just think there were too many characters, and it feels kind of weird being like characters because these are obviously based off real people, but I just feel like some of the people that were mentioned were kind of irrelevant, and like it just kind of made the story like it made it like feel less like a story because you're like, okay, do I have to remember that person? Like, is that person going to be important? And then in the long run, a lot of the characters that were mentioned were not necessarily important to the overall story, and so I just feel like some of it could have been cut out. Like it could have just been like a friend. You know, like it didn't have to be like their name and like what they do and stuff. And so I did think it just got bogged down a little bit too much with like historical information, which made it feel less like a story. But overall, it was an enjoyable read. So I said it was a flop, and now I feel like I'm going back on that. Like it wasn't necessarily a flop. It just wasn't as enjoyable as I thought it was going to be. But I learned a lot, put some history into perspective, and I would definitely want to read more about the Kennedys in the future from this experience. All right, so that is all of the books that I read in August. Thank you so much for being here. Let me guys know what some of your favorite books were from August, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, love you.